everybody. Sorry, I was running in from another meeting this morning, and I just made it in time after going to the wrong building first and driving another 5 miles to get here, but I did it. So I'm here. My name is Emily Myerson. I'm the Northern Lower Peninsula Trail Coordinator, and right now I'm the designated State Water Trail Coordinator. So that's my extra title I've been working on. I've been working with the DNR for about a year now. So we know they're good for our sense of place, and people want to live near them, and they want to be in walkable communities. They increase land values. They're good for our economy. They're healthy recreation and transportation choices. They can be if they're non-motorized. They connect communities and community centers. They can highlight local history and our heritage. And they can expose the public to stewardship issues. So with that, Michigan, about 4 or 5 years ago, realized they have 2,500 miles of state designated trail. So I actually see it as the question isn't why should we have a water trails program? It's really how can we not have a water trails program? We have to move that way. And that's been documented in the DNR's land strategy, the state trail plan, and the state's water strategy. All of those go towards that. So water trail opportunities with 3,288 miles of Great Lakes coastline, 10,000 miles of rivers and streams, 11,000 inland lakes, over 5 acres. And in tourism, it's one of the largest growth rates in tourism is paddle sports. So again, looking back to those opportunities, how can we not? We need to move forward with a state water trail program. But we also have people say, well, why? Why do we need to do that when we already have locally designated trails? There's lots of people that have designated trails. The Water Trails website has 41 and growing trails. People have been using these water trails for centuries, so why do we need a water trail program when they're already there? There's a national water trail program, and liveries are already promoting their own trails, so why should we do it? So again, we'll get back to how can we not, because we're the state, and we're the state, we're the national leader in trails, and we also have more water and coastline than anyone. But it's also because we need to provide clear information to the public. That's really essential. Right now, it's very difficult to find clear and consistent information about paddling in general and paddling water trails in particular. There needs to be standards that are required so you can have that consistency, so you can manage public expectations. So the public can figure out what's the best trail for them, if they're a beginner or they're advanced, or maybe they want an urban experience, or maybe they want to not see a building the whole time they're out. So a way to manage those user expectations. So that's another reason. And then regional engagement. That's what it's all about. Our water trails cross multiple boundaries. They don't exist in one government jurisdiction. And so we need to engage people regionally and have them work together to develop, manage, and maintain the water trails. So that is why we see that a water trail program is needed. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mark Miller, our Regional Initiatives Deputy, to talk about how you create a program, because that's not so easy at the state either. It's like, okay, just create a program. Well, you can't just do that. There's ways, and he's going to talk a little bit about the process and our draft water trail policy that we have copies of today, and we wanted to talk about a little bit.
Well, good morning, everyone. As Emily was saying, that there is some rationale for why we need to create a policy. And where we've landed, many of you have been in dialogue with us for probably almost a year now on what we're doing. Part of it is that we need to have some information internally to help drive our process. We need to have a review by not just the Parks and Rec Department or division of the agency, but also wildlife, law enforcement, fisheries. They all need to be involved and have some say in what we're doing. So we're being very inclusive by creating a program and making sure that every base is covered. And then we have to follow our own process for that type of approval. Let's see. Okay, so why do we do that? We want to provide direction for future employees. There will be a time when Emily and I won't be there, even though we've only been at the agency for a year. There'll be a time when somebody will need to take this up and follow it. We want to make sure that the review has and incorporates lots of different perspectives. That includes the law enforcement, the first responders perspective. That includes some of the others, fisheries, resources, et cetera, and make sure that we include that. And then finally, the way we're following with an internal policy document for ourselves is to remove those potential conflicts and also arbitrary decisions. We want to spell it out so we have a fair process, one that's understood, and it can move forward so that no one is in a bad position because of our inconsistent decision making. So, we've been saying this for quite a while, but we want to make sure that the end result is that we have a state-designated water trail program that has broad-based support. We want to make sure that there's people out there in the community that support it, and that the groups that are applying for the designation have a dialogue so that we can bring everyone along. That will help us avoid conflicts that can boil up and harm the program and harm our objectives, but we want to make sure that we also provide consistent opportunities for heritage, conservation education, and other things. And so we also want to point out that it's not just for non-motorized. We want to also include motorized trails so that you can have aspects for that and for providing opportunities for people who want to do that, especially along our Chain of Lakes area. Okay. Highlights of the water trail criteria. We are doing this to make sure we provide, like Harry and Barbara was saying earlier, some consistent information, quality trail experience for our users. We want to make sure that the users know what they're getting into, they have clear information, and that they'll be able to make their decisions on trying a water trail for the first time and then returning again in the future based on their expectations and what they might experience. We, again, want to make sure there's broad community support. There are going to be some places that don't want to have a water trail. We don't understand why that is, but there are places that will object, and we want to make sure that we can avoid conflicts there because that can spill over and cause a lot of problems. And then we also want to make sure we have a sustainable business plan. In applying for the state designation, we want to make sure that you have a really clear idea of where you're going to take this and then have thought of it through and then how you're going to achieve your own goals for your water trail. We've had some discussion, as some of you may know, about how we're going to designate water trails. This gets us to the information that people need to have about their experience in order to choose that trail. What we've landed on here is that we're going to divide it into inland and then Great Lakes and then motorized. But on the inland rivers and streams, you're going to be able to designate segments either beginner, intermediate, or advanced. And so that is stuck with us throughout this concept. And we appreciate folks who have provided input for us on this. Beginner segments, you're going to have shorter trips. You're going to have well-signed access points. We're going to try to make sure that any hazards are well signed and communicated so that a new user would be able to avoid those, be able to find the portages, make sure they know where the dams are and be able to find the access sites so they don't blow past them. And so that will be tailored for those new people, families, those types of outings like scout outings, and then be able to identify where they need to go to have that type of experience. On the intermediate segments, we're going to have longer ones, 2-4 hours, 6 to 12 miles. You're going to have some more skills in order to do that, and the expectation would be that you would know what you're getting into when you see that intermediate designation. And then for the advanced, this could be really tough stuff, but you could also be out in the wilderness with fewer and less developed access points. You're going to need to have some good skills, self-rescue skills, navigation skills, and then be able to get you through some endurance and paddling longer segments. On the Great Lakes, we want to make sure that people understand what they're getting into. Some of you earlier were talking about St. Mary's River, Gary, and some of the other places where you're paddling with freighters, etc. you need to know what you're doing. And so we want to designate that and have a communication standard so that people are communicating that risk to folks. And then finally, for motorized trails, we needed to put this in. I think there's an opportunity to develop access points and amenities along all of our trails, but in particular, if we have a place that would make sense for a motorized trail and non-motorized, but certainly would like to have that opportunity for folks so that people who want to cruise a waterway would be able to get out, enjoy an access point, and hopefully have communities buy in with this because it will help enhance their economic well-being. All right, the process. This has changed over the last 9 months or so. We're going to have the program meet these criteria, as we've talked about before. And it'll go through the existing DNR trail designation program. So terrestrial trails, bike trails, et cetera, ORVs, all run through this process. There'll be an application to a water trails program coordinator, yet to be named, but Emily for now as a de facto. But we want to make sure we have more staff for this, so that's where we might want some help from you all in the future. Make a note. That we will go through that process with an application, review it. The divisions of DNR will have an opportunity to weigh in, so law enforcement, fisheries, wildlife, parks and rec, et cetera, will be able to review it and make comments. And then the final arbiter, the person who's going to make the decision, yea or nay, is going to be the Water Trail Program Coordinator. No running through the Natural Resources Commission, the director, all of that. We're going to make this simple as possible, and so that was our hope. So that's where we've gone with that particular process. After the designation, trail segment types, etc., can be changed. We want to make sure that you all have a living, breathing agreement with us so that you can continue to make improvements. Or if something changes, we have a windstorm, another invasive species like emerald ash borer or something like that that causes a lot of blowdowns, you'll be able to make those changes. We'll ask you to get out, and like the Huron Clinton Watershed Council has, ambassadors. You go out and self-audit and make sure the trail's working. I think that's a great idea, but you'll have to do that as part of this program. And then DNR will have the opportunity to remove someone if they're not holding up their end of the bargain and communicating to users and having that broad-based community support. There will be an opportunity for us to do that. You all have had opportunity to see it as part of this trail summit. You can find the draft policy on the LEA website. And then we also want to ask you to send in to that email address any comments. And a lot of you are already ahead of the game. Elizabeth Riggs, you have been fantastic in giving comments. Where are you? Thank you. So a lot of you have been able to do that. Fred Cowles and others have been able to provide comments. So continue to do that. This is going to be the last time. Okay, we're going to get ready to launch. So if you have any comments, please let us know, and then we'll be able to move forward. One more thing before I hand it off to Patrick is that I want to point out Tamara Jakorski is in the audience. Stand up, Tamara. I just want to point out, because it takes a whole team of people, thank you, to do this. She works with grants. Tamara works with grants and is here today to support us all. We want to make sure you know who we are and can work with us. And typically works with organizations or communities and counties, townships, et cetera, on grants, but can work with you. And so I just wanted to point her out because it's great to have her here. Okay, next.
You want to take a couple of questions?
Oh, sure, we can do that. Barbara?
So what is the relationship with the state designation and Pure Michigan?
Beautiful question, thank you. And with the national program as well. So the way we envision this program working is that it's going to be a stepping stone to even bigger and greater things, right? So some of you have got it a little bit backwards, which will be easier on you. But we would anticipate that a self-designated water trail, people working together, will be able to apply for the more simple and easier state designation, maybe go and reach next for the national designation, and then be able to go for the Pure Michigan designation after that. So those are 3 things to strive for. And so that's our hierarchy. Some of you are going to be able to regress and come back to us, but that's what we're thinking in terms of the hierarchy. And the Pure Michigan standards are still being worked out. It's a different process that was set up by legislation. So we have to go through a rulemaking process. And so we're going to get there, and then Pure Michigan you have to get a license from Pure Michigan. So that's it. Next.
Just to be clear, you can have one water trail with beginner segments, intermediate segments, advanced segments.
Correct. And that would be the best, I mean, that would help the users. Remember, we want to do this for the users. So the Grand River is a great example. The headwaters area is really technically difficult. Probably needs to have an intermediate or even advanced. But then when you get downstream, it's going to be a little bit easier flowing. You can go to easy and start encouraging people to go there if they're new paddlers. But if they're experienced paddlers, it probably would be a better time for them. And you do not want to have somebody who hasn't paddled before get on a segment that's really hard, and they will never pick up a paddle again. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Next question. Yep.
The Grand River is different than a Pawpaw River, for example. Well, one is more of a creek-like, and the other is more of a lake-like. And I would think there would have to be much more flexibility with the creek-like than there is with the lake-like.
I think that within the standards, you'll find that you can designate that level. And by providing 3 different types, you'll be able to fall within one of those 3 categories. So Pawpaw has a lot of downed trees, a lot of woody debris, which we'll get to in a second. But that is something we need to try to do.
Let's do one more, and then we can take questions at lunch and afterwards. Just one more question, just for time's sake.
Looked at instructor certification or guide programs.
Can you repeat that again?
Has the state looked at instructor, guide, or outfitter certification?
No. And I think for simplicity's sake, we try to avoid that and allow the organizations that are applying to deal with those issues. If we need to come back to it at some point, that might be good. But hopefully, the organization and broad-based community support will police any issues or provide guidance in that area. All right. Thank you. Go ahead. You want to introduce?
Before we start, I want to say one thing because it's really appropriate for this group of folks. One of my best friends of all time told me a joke the other day while we were looking for rocks in Grand Marais, and he's 10. What's the worst vegetable to have on a boat? A leak. You gotta love the clean humor. There are 16 designated natural rivers in the state of Michigan. Here they are. If you are one of them and you have a water trail, let's talk more about natural rivers and the involvement. Natural Rivers is a program where we try and guide development a little bit more. It doesn't mean you cannot have signage, but we're going to weigh in on where the signs should go to protect the user experience. Some people want to float down a river and not see a sign. Some people want a whole lot of signs. And this program really tries to balance that. So maybe the sign is under the bridge that you're about to float under that says, hey, by the way, in half a mile on your left, there's an access, versus an independent sign. An accessible launch where folks can paddle up and get out and then tip and the canoe slides back in. On the Huron, for example, there's a bridge that they want for the bicycle trail, and in the same park they want to put in one of these launches. So what we're striving for is to have that launch under the bridge. So as you're paddling, it's not a structure and then trees and then another structure. You're condensing those uses. If your river is designated, it doesn't mean the entire river is designated. There are segments that are. This is the Huron, and you can see the main stream from Kent Lake Dam down to Ann Arbor is designated, but a lot of the tributaries are not. And a lot of the habitat of the lakes, the lake shore in that watershed are also not designated. There are 10 values that we protect within the Natural Rivers Program. Fish, free-flowing condition, wildlife, boating, scenic, aesthetic, floodplain, ecologic, historic, and recreational values. You guys fit right in there. But so does wood. And so do fish. And so do the people that fish on the wood. And so it's inevitably about trying to find that balance. I fully understand that wood can be dangerous, and I fully understand that wood can inhibit paddling and cause portages and tip canoes and things like that. But it's also imperative to the health of the river. And I don't just mean the fish. But if you think about, I like to equate rivers with traffic. If you think about a river with no wood, that enables the water to just get at butt-kicking speeds and haul on down to the Great Lakes. And with that brings energy. And that energy has the ability to pick up sediment. And that sediment usually comes from the stream bottom or the stream banks. So if the river cuts down into its valley and it's getting lower and it's getting lower and it's getting lower, eventually these banks become stable and they fall in, and landowners are really upset because it causes erosion of their property. And what falls in with the land? Trees, right? So we've exacerbated the problem. It's a positive feedback cycle. But that can be balanced. So I like to think of a river with wood as a really pothole-ridden two-track. You can't physically get up to 75 miles an hour. You might be, Mark might be able to. No, just teasing. You can't get up to 75 miles an hour. You have to go 35, right? And you bump, it's the roughness. The roughness really influences the physics of the river that keeps it all stable. Does that mean that we can't move a log that goes over the top so that we can open it and paddle? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that it's a balance. The jam, the wood is so good for even the surface area of the wood that grows algae, because then there are bugs that eat that specific algae, and there are fish that eat those bugs, and there are people that fish those fish that eat the bugs that grow on the algae that grow on the logs, and there are people that are in kayaks fishing those fish. So it's about balance. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Doesn't mean you have to take the whole jam out. Leave the wood in the river, but here's how it is. It's like this. This is a log jam. Do I have time to set this up? If I knock it over, disregard everything I've said. No, I'm just kidding. Is that my time? So, oh God, that one's gonna make it fall. You can take a piece out and it won't collapse. You still have the function of the wood. And then you add it back to the river. And then you do it again. And I'm not gonna do this. You guys are like, man, this guy's gonna talk forever. And I will. Harry, you gotta pull me off. Man, I had a lot of coffee. Another stick, you can move it around. You can relocate it. So what we ask is, there are numerous methods to use. One that has been vetted by both the DEQ and DNR staff is the clean and open method. You can find it online. It's on the Clinton River Watershed Council website. It's on the Huron River Watershed Council website. It talks about taking a couple key pieces that are blocking navigation, tuck them in behind so the wood stays in the water, still provides the fish habitat. It provides the frictional coefficients that all of us dorks measure and talk about on Saturday mornings. But it maintains the function. And that's really what I'm after. I have a stack of business cards. I'd be happy to talk with you about your water trail or to put you in touch with the folks that manage your water specifically. That's what I got.